Before a single shot was fired, the United States was already divided. North and South, two regions growing further apart by the day, faced a reckoning. The Civil War would become the deadliest conflict in American history, but its roots stretch far deeper than the battlefield. This is the story of how a nation, just 85 years old, began to fracture beyond repair. The United States was built on a powerful idea: liberty and equality. But from the start, there was a contradiction at its core. While many celebrated freedom, millions remained enslaved. As the 19th century unfolded, the North and South developed distinct identities. The North industrialized rapidly, the South remained reliant on agriculture and slavery. Cotton became king, and with it came a growing resistance from abolitionists determined to end the practice. The nation tried to hold itself together with a series of fragile compromises. The Missouri Compromise in 1820, the Compromise of 1850, each aimed to maintain balance between free and slave states. But expansion westward brought new challenges. Would new territories allow slavery? Each debate intensified distrust and deepened the divide. Kansas became a battleground, literally, as pro- and anti-slavery settlers clashed in violent raids. This era, Bleeding Kansas, signaled that compromise was becoming impossible. Amid the turmoil, a tall, self-taught lawyer from Illinois emerged: Abraham Lincoln. Known for his sharp mind and stirring speeches, Lincoln opposed the expansion of slavery, not necessarily slavery itself, but its growth into new states. His election in 1860 alarmed the South. In 10 southern states, Lincoln didn't even appear on the ballot, yet he won the presidency. To many in the South, this felt like the final straw. South Carolina acted first, declaring its secession from the Union just weeks after Lincoln's election. One by one, 11 southern states followed. They formed the Confederate States of America, arguing that they had voluntarily joined the Union and now had the right to leave it. Their leaders justified secession as a defense of states' rights. But in their own declarations, slavery was front and center. Lincoln entered the presidency facing a shattered nation. In his inaugural address, he pleaded for unity, insisting he had no intention to abolish slavery where it already existed. But he made one thing clear: secession was unconstitutional. He would preserve the Union. As tensions rose, Southern militias seized federal properties across the South. Then, in April 1861, Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. The Civil War had begun. Many believed the war would be short. Young men rushed to enlist, eager for adventure. But the first major battle, Bull Run, shattered those illusions. It ended in chaos and retreat for the North. In the West, a relatively unknown Union general, Ulysses S. Grant, began proving his skill in Kentucky and Tennessee. Meanwhile, Lincoln struggled with indecisive commanders in the East, including General George McClellan, who hesitated even when victory was within reach. By mid-1862, Lincoln recognized that preserving the Union alone might not be enough. Abolitionists pressed him to take a moral stand. Following the Union's narrow victory at Antietam, the single bloodiest day in American history, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Beginning January 1, 1863, all enslaved people in Confederate-held territory would be declared free. The war, once about preserving the Union, was now also about ending slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation shifted the conflict's meaning both at home and abroad. European powers stepped back from supporting the Confederacy. Black Americans in the North enlisted to fight for freedom. And the South, feeling cornered, braced for a long and grueling war. For Abraham Lincoln, this was no longer just about geography or politics. It was about defining the soul of the nation. What followed would test that soul in every way. As the Union's early struggles in the East dragged on, the war expanded in scope and intensity across the country. From river battles to mountain campaigns, and from legislative breakthroughs to emotional turning points, the American Civil War entered its most transformative phase. This is the second chapter in the story of a divided nation and its path toward rebirth. Union leadership in the East continued to change hands after setbacks like Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. Despite outnumbering Confederate forces, Union generals struggled to deliver decisive victories. Meanwhile, in the West, General Ulysses S. Grant and his trusted ally, General William Tecumseh Sherman, made bold advances. Their campaign to take Vicksburg, a Confederate stronghold on the Mississippi River, would prove pivotal. In the summer of 1863, General Robert E. Lee launched another invasion of the North, hoping to turn the tide. His forces met Union troops in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Over 3 days of brutal fighting, the tide finally turned. Lee's final assault, known as Pickett's Charge, ended in devastating defeat. The Union victory at Gettysburg, paired with the fall of Vicksburg, marked a major turning point in the war. With Union victories came the opportunity to solidify the war's moral purpose. The Emancipation Proclamation, issued after Antietam, began to take effect. Thousands of formerly enslaved people in Confederate territories were declared free. African Americans joined the Union Army in growing numbers, contributing significantly to the war effort and redefining the conflict's goals. Sherman moved southward, capturing Atlanta and launching his infamous March to the Sea. His strategy, later known as Total War, aimed not just to defeat Confederate armies, but to cripple their ability to support them. Sherman's destruction of infrastructure, supplies, and morale helped further isolate the Confederate cause. Meanwhile, West Virginia officially separated from Virginia, aligning with the Union. As the war dragged on, political pressure mounted. Lincoln's re-election in 1864 was far from guaranteed. Many Americans were tired of the war. But Sherman's capture of Atlanta reinvigorated Union confidence. Lincoln won decisively, with strong support from Union troops. He pushed forward the 13th Amendment, which would abolish slavery permanently. Grant, now in command of all Union armies, coordinated a series of offensives. In the East, he pressed Lee's army relentlessly. Though Union casualties were high, Grant's strategy of attrition began to pay off. Petersburg fell after a long siege, forcing Lee to evacuate Richmond. Sherman's march through the Carolinas hastened the Confederate collapse. On April 9, 1865, Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. Grant offered generous terms, allowing Confederate soldiers to return home with dignity. It was the beginning of the end. In the following weeks, other Confederate armies laid down their arms. Lincoln's vision of healing took center stage. At his second inauguration, he urged Americans to bind up the nation's wounds. But just days after the Confederate surrender, Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. The nation mourned deeply. His death marked both an ending and a beginning, the painful transition to Reconstruction and national reconciliation. The Civil War cost over 600,000 lives, but it preserved the Union and ended the institution of slavery. The fight for freedom and equality would continue, but the sacrifices made during the war reshaped the American identity. In Lincoln's memory and in the freedoms won, the nation was reborn. The Civil War tested the soul of a nation and reshaped what freedom meant. Subscribe to Historic for more turning points in history and stories they didn't teach you in school.